So after 3.5 years, the Sony a74 is finally here. And man, is this a game changer. So yes, the a74 is coming. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with the Sony rep this week and confirm that Thursday, the pre-orders will become available for the new, I guess you'd say, flagship camera. I'm gonna get into why today I think it is going to be a flagship camera or who it's going to be a flagship camera for complete transparency. This is the Sony a7S III. I hate talking about a device and not like having something to reference to. And there are a few things that are gonna be coming with the Sony a74 that will be similar to the a7S III. So moving forward, there's already a handful of videos out about the specs that seem to be confirmed. Typically on sites with Sony rumors, those pre-launch specs are pretty accurate. And judging by the progression of the previous a74, where we've moved into this world with the a7S III, the Sony FX3, and just some of the recent cameras, the tech specs for the a74 makes sense. Before we get into the tech specs though, I wanna personally just dive straight into who I think this camera is for. That way we eliminate any debate as to like, what is this? What is the reason for this? A lot of people think the Sony a7S III should have been that all-around thing, which in my argument for somebody that's a creator or a YouTuber, this really is an all-around thing. You don't really need to go above 12 megapixels when talking social media. But to be fair, $3,500 is a pretty steep price point. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the Sony a7R series, which is, again, people were like, why don't you give this better video features so that way it's more of like a good walk around. But the Sony a7R series are meant to be a more like higher end photography camera for like those very professional, more photo-oriented people who also want just a smidge of video work too. A7S series being very video, A7R being very photo, and then you have the middle guy. Typically the A7 like entry series, the just A7 III and A7 IV in this situation is supposed to be your entry level, just all around best of both worlds run and gun rig. The more affordable option, the more entry level, like I said, that still has some tech spec while not sacrificing much. So when people say things like, what do we need an a7 IV when we have an a7S III? Or why didn't they put this in it because the a7S III or Sony a7 FX3 has these things? Or why didn't they give it more megapixels like the A9 or the A1 or the R series? It's because it's not easy to just throw all these items into one camera. And obviously, if you were to do that, it would be a much more expensive camera. So I referenced the idea that the Sony a7 IV is probably gonna be a high selling camera for a lot of like people that are reaching out of that just enthusiast, hobbyist side, and they're taking things a little bit more serious, and they wanna have options for run and gun shooting, video and photo work. I feel like the a7 IV is gonna dominate those like small brands and businesses who want to invest into a camera for all their social media posts, but don't want to like full send into the price range of like the a7S III and this a7 FX3. Also, I personally feel like the a7 IV is going to be the dominator of like the content scene. With some of the things that are gonna be available in the a7 IV in the price range compared to the a7S III, I just feel like some people aren't going to want to make that $1,000 upgrade for this higher end of a camera when they can just go ahead and do what they can do with the a7 IV. So I expect this camera to be insane. Like really, I think it's going to be an odd flagship, like a very high selling camera, a very talked about camera, while not having some of the higher end specs that some of these other cameras have. I think in this last year with the launch of the Canon cameras and some of these new higher end cinema budget cameras too, and just other devices that move into the 6K, 8K world, I feel like hopefully we're starting to take a step back and realize like we are so far away from 6K, 8K as an average, as like an opening consumption device for resolution. We're just not quite there. That's why all these Sony cameras fit a good current 2021 high production value across the board. All right, so the tech specs. I'm sure most of you guys know this, so feel free to skip through this because I'm gonna get into the tech specs, the price, the launch date, talking about the sensor, and also the 4K slow-mo mode that a lot of people are pissed off about. As usual, video looks like 4K, IAF, animal IAF, AF, IAF movies, so high quality Sony autofocus as per usual. It's meant to be labeled as a field camera, pro camera. You got silent shutter, 33 megapixel, which we're gonna get more in the sensor and why I'm personally happy about this size, and I kinda wanna go more into that. 10-bit 422, and that's big because it's rumored, which is probably is going to be this way to kind of cut the price gap and make sure it doesn't overheat. It's going to only have 4K 60 FPS versus the Sony a7S III having 4K 120 FPS. Again, talk more about that in a second. You're gonna have your typical S and Q dial, which is amazing from switching back and forth from just regular 4K high quality to an ultra smooth slow motion. It is said to have the articulating screen. A couple people have said that it's not going to. I'm interested to know what you guys think in the comment. Like, just, I mean, think of the idea that Sony actually would say, for this one, let's not put the full flip out screen. But again, the rumors are that it is gonna have that. Optical steady shot, which is like the gimbal-like stabilization, which is insane in these new Sony cameras. USB 10 gigabyte per second live streaming, which is really cool to see newer cameras. I think Canon's been doing this too, like making their cameras connect to computers a little bit more easier through the software. So that way streamers and creators can use these in a more convenient way for like their live stream and online content, creative looks, and finally 15 stops of dynamic range. Obviously there's a lot of in-depth specs. You can go to plenty of creators out there and learn more about what this camera is gonna have across the board with whatever interests that you personally have. All right, so price point. I've been told by a good source that the camera's gonna launch at $24.99. If it's not that price, feel free to rant me in the comments down below. I can only work with the information that I'm given here, okay? $2,500 USD actually makes a lot of sense considering the price gap from the Sony a7S III to the Sony a7 IV. Hence why you're not getting certain things like 4K 60p versus 4K 120p that the Sony a7S III offers. I tried my best to see if I could snag one this week, so that way like when Thursday came out, I'd be able to like have one, but even like official Sony dealers and reps in the area don't have these cameras, and I've been told that they'll probably actually come out around Thanksgiving time, which is a lot less of a wait from what we had with the a7S III. I wanna say I pre-ordered this at the start of August, and I don't think I got this till nearly October, or maybe even in October. Wow, I've had this for a year now. It's crazy to think like how great this is after a year. Okay, neither here nor there. So sensor size, as long as we're working with the same sensor technology that Sony has been working with, I think 33 megapixels is going to be great for what this camera has to offer. A big reason why the Sony a7S III has 12 megapixels, doesn't have anything higher, is because the 12 megapixels allows for that amazing low light opportunity, which in a professional standpoint, when you're in a run and gun scenario and you need a film-like camera that has a lot more control in post, in the editing software, having that low light, that high ISO, low light quality is so clutch. So by going to 33 megapixels, you're not going to get as good low light quality. I'm sure the a7 IV in comparison to a lot of cameras is gonna have an amazing low light quality, but again, this camera is more for an all around. It's not meant to be that like low light beast like the a7S III. It's meant to be just like better than other options out there. While on the other end with 33 megapixels, that's like a perfect world for photography. I think a lot of people really underestimate megapixels. Like 24 megapixels is amazing for high end, like good large size printable photography. So 33 megapixels is honestly a little higher than what I thought it would be for a mid series. It makes me wonder like what the A7R series is gonna do moving forward. We're gonna see like 200 megapixel cameras coming out with Sony in the next couple of years. But with the current sensor technology, I think that 33 megapixels is just gonna be a perfect range to get high quality photography while still having good high quality film video work in a low light, good color profile. And that moves me into the big debate, the 4K 60 in this. And I think a lot of people probably underestimate the engineering that goes into these cameras to get 4K 120 out of a camera. Again, that's why the Sony a7S III is not marketed and branded around the idea of photography. By having more of that higher megapixel and that processing, they would have probably had to take away the runtime of 4K 120 FPS, or it wouldn't have been as good quality or good profile pictures, whatever it may be. It's not easy throwing all these crazy features into this like compact, like easy to use body that doesn't overheat and has long hours of runtime. I'm gonna keep it a buck with y'all. I've had the Sony a7S III, the Sony FX3 for about a year to 6 months now since I got the FX3. I thought that I wanted 4K 120 FPS so bad years ago when we were in like the Sony a6300 era and that like slow motion video. Like, don't get me wrong, I use 4K 120 FPS, but anymore like 4K 120 FPS for me, like I don't use it as much as what I thought I would. So 4K 60 FPS is more than reasonable in my opinion for a $2,500 entry level camera that does it all, that is like a really good run and gun. On top of that, it has 10-bit 422 with still 15 stops of dynamic range, and I would assume works well with S-Log3. To me, I would rather have 4K S-Log3 high dynamic range 10-bit 422 and have that at 4K 60 FPS, so it's still slow motion, than to like sacrifice price or like runtime for an extra, to go to the extra 120 FPS. It's the only argument I've seen about the specs of this camera, and I don't think it's a justifiable enough argument to say that this camera is not going to do well because it only does 4K 60p and not 4K 120p. I feel like anybody that thinks in their head that they're going to be any less of a creator because they don't have that much more slow motion in that price range, they're probably in it for the wrong reasons. Like they probably think like visuals make them grow. I don't know, it's just a weird debate. After this many years as a creator, I just learned like the real tools that you need in situations, and especially with the price range. Like the only argument I feel like somebody could make to me is like, well, what about those like buttery smooth wedding videography shots, or like you're shooting product shots and you're doing like video product shots at a high frame rate, so you're trying to do a lot of work. I would probably say if you're at that point where you're doing high-end stuff like that and you need 4K 120 FPS for wedding and product stuff, like you're probably so immersed in your business, you're probably using a Sony a7S III or FX3 anyways. So why give an entry-level camera more tech spec for more potential problems or a higher price when most of those people are probably using these cameras? I don't get that. But at the end of the day, these are just my thoughts. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think they missed the mark by not having 120 FPS on this camera body? Do you think everything I said today is complete BS and that this camera is not gonna do well, considering like you have so many Sony options out there, and then now Canon also coming out with some banger cameras? I'm also interested to see who's all gonna be getting this camera. I'm talking to Megan about it right now. I've been trying so hard to switch Megan from Nikon to Sony for years, and she loves the Sony a7S III. Oh, by the way, menu system too is gonna be the same as the Sony a7S III and FX3. I think that's like Sony's new menu system, which is amazing, by the way. But Megan loves this menu system on these new cameras. Believe it or not, that was one thing holding her back from switching. So we're looking at switching her from Nikon to Sony, and I think this will be the perfect camera to do. Either or, I'm pumped about this. I get so excited about new tech gear. Like, I'm not even an Apple guy, and all these new Apple things are coming out. I'm just like, what an awesome time of the year. I love it. The new Google Pixel as well, just like so much tech stuff. I need to do more tech videos. I hope this video does well today. Leave a like, comment down below, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so that way this video does do well, so I can do more of them. All right, guys, gals, I appreciate all the support. That's all I got for you guys today. I'm out. Peace. Deuces.